it's been a fast 6 years. I mean, these years are just flying by. But yeah, we're on our third president already, and Sean Dowling's doing a great job. And yeah, but we've still gone through our growing pains. We're still changing. It seems like every other year. But it's a good conference.
And one of the big changes that was instituted this past school year, and it'll be for at least 2 years, the NJAC went from 5 general classification divisions to 7. Also has sports-specific and other sports. Your thoughts on how that went? Obviously, it gave schools more of an opportunity to win championships.
It wasn't so much about the championships. It was about providing competitive schedules for the schools. There were some schools that opted out of every crossover so that they can schedule independents that they can compete with. It made the conference, the divisions obviously smaller, so there wasn't as big a disparity in size. So there were definitely some advantages of it and some disadvantages. ADs had to work harder because they had to get more games. I'm the chairperson of the scheduling committee, and this is, again, now the third or fourth change in divisions for us. And right now, over the summer, we're all talking to our coaches and getting ready in August to determine if we're going to do it again, because we start doing scheduling now for that next cycle. So we're all talking about it. There's been some talk that it's too small. I happen to be in favor of the small divisions. I bring up NFL football. I bring it up Major League Baseball. They all have small divisions. It doesn't seem to be a problem for them. Of course, for different reasons, obviously. But I like it because it makes us more competitive within our division. And we have plenty of games because we have the crossovers. So it gives us a different a look at some of our other competition within the conference. But I don't know which way it's going to go, Dan. I really don't know which way it's going to go.
Now, you mentioned some teams opted out of the crossovers. Was that part of the bylaws, or is that something new you put in last year to accommodate these teams? Because I know for Vernon, for example, it worked out very well for them. Softball, top of my head, they made the states for the first time in a long time because they were able to go out, because their league was so tough with Sparta and Pope John and Mount Olive and Morris Hills. They were able to go out and get enough power points to get into states. So just your thoughts on that.
Well, yes, we made a bylaw so that could happen. The only problem is the bylaw reads that if you get out of one sport within a season, in other words, let's say the fall season, it's all sports. Mm-hmm. You can't just pick and choose what sports you're not going to play, independents or crossovers. So really not too many people did it. It was Sussex Tech and Vernon basically, and it was an advantage for both of them. Sussex Tech obviously has some of the tech schools they wanted to play, and they can compete with better. So it worked out well for them, and Bill's doing it again, so it worked out good for his programs.
Obviously, I believe that was the biggest change within the conference, but was there anything else that you can think of as someone's on the inside that maybe the regular fan wouldn't notice that you guys tweaked this past year and worked well?
Well, I don't know about working well. One of the problems we had was the distribution of awards, all league. We had, in some cases, we were struggling to find quality athletes to put on some of these all-league teams because the numbers, we adjusted the numbers, but the way we adjusted the numbers, you put it into practice and so all of a sudden it's not working as well. So I got an email this morning. We are in the same process. We're looking to make that adjustment so that the teams are more representative of the best athletes in those divisions, rather than just to maintain the integrity of what all league means and all division means. So that's a growing pain as well. That's something we're working on.
Any other changes on the horizon?
That's sort of a segue into the whole football
yes, indeed.
Issue.
You know me well, John.
As a member of the public non-public committee with Bill Edelman, we've been working on this issue, and there's something on the table right now, which the executive committee of the NJAC approved, and we're looking to go to vote in December, which has us splitting the non-publics from the publics. In the meantime, a group of ADs in North Jersey, because a lot of the South Jersey schools believe it's a North Jersey problem, they got together and started to develop or have a working model of a super conference, combining our conference with several other conferences. And we saw a model and we looked it over, and it was interesting, but we have a process in our league, and we follow our process. And although the other 3 conferences involved wanted that vote to take place in June, we said, unfortunately, it's a major bylaw change because you're pulling football out of the NJAC. And in order to do something like that, we have to first present it as a motion, and then the following meeting, we talk about it, discuss it. And it gives people time to talk to their coaches, talk to their administration, and to find out what each position of each school is.
So by going by your process, unfortunately, sometimes public perception would be, well, if they're not right on board right away, they're not with it. That means nothing. The league has not made any stance either way, correct?
No, in fact, we did discuss it off the record, if you will, because the motion was made, and then we had discussion. But the bottom line is the motion couldn't be voted on because we had to wait a month or the next meeting. And yeah, there is support for it. And there's also a lack of support for it from certain schools. And we also talked about, whether it's good for your school or bad for your school, how are we going to vote? Are you going to vote as a school, or are you going to vote as a conference? In other words, if it hurts some of the schools in our conference, should we be supporting it?
Right.
Shouldn't we be loyal to the people in our conference? So again, there's some of the conversations. On the other side of the coin, there's those schools that say, listen, some of those schools don't deserve our loyalty. I'm going to put it that way. So we're going to see how it goes. It's going to be a vote. It's got to be a 2/3 vote, I think, in order for it to pass. So we'll see what happens when the time gets closer.
I know some of the public criticism of the possible realignment came from some of the smaller schools in conference. I know I read some stuff from Kevin White from Kinnelon. He said it solves maybe some of the bigger schools and the non-publics, but the little schools, they really didn't take into consideration competition level and stuff like that. What do you say to the people in the smaller schools? Obviously, you guys are going to all discuss this then, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with Kevin. Certainly respect him. He's a great coach. My son coaches with him, the more schools within a conference, the more flexibility you have. And, I reserve judgment because it's not a final product yet. There are so many things we can do with the crossovers and things of that nature, with rivalries and traditions and those kind of things, which with a bigger conference, you can do some of those things and maybe satisfy some of the issues that Kevin had mentioned. I think the concept is a good concept because the more the NJAC provides more flexibility for a lot of schools than the SCIL did. The SCIL had 10 schools. It was, regardless of the size, that's who you played. Now you're playing people in our NJAC that are closer to your size. So that's the bigger conference provides, and I think it will provide that. I just hope everybody could be happy. I hate teams that schools are going to walk away and say, this is not for me,
right,
but it's too bad, I got to do it anyway.
Right, and you had mentioned before, obviously a lot of this stems from the big Bergen County powers plus St. Pete's. In the NJAC, 3 football-playing non-public schools, Pope John, Delbarton, and Morris Catholic, so not as big as an issue. Do you think that'll play into some of the voting? I know that'd be pure speculation right now, but since there's only 3, and to be perfectly honest, only 2 are pretty big powerhouses, Morris Catholic's been up and down. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's probably not fair for me to give my opinion on how this impacts the non-publics. I don't think the non-publics in our division or our conference obviously want to play the big boys.
Right.
And you know what schools I'm talking about. But I think they would be, and again, I don't want to speak for them, but they may be more able to accept playing schools of their size, like the DePauls and St. Peter's and for Delbarton and Pope John, not Morris Catholic. Morris Catholic, there are some small non-publics, and they would be playing more of them. The bottom line is the whole concept of a level playing field. It's that whole concept. Public schools can only draw from within their boundaries. Non-publics can draw outside their boundaries. And it's a whole recruiting thing that comes into play. Whether we believe some schools do or don't, it's immaterial. It's just not a level playing field. And that's really where the whole concept was born.
Do you think if the NJAC goes along and says, okay, we want to do this for football, obviously in the non-public world, some of the sports they excel at, some they don't. You might run into the thing where well, I want to be out of the NJAC in this sport, but in another because we're competitive there. How would the league, you think, approach that subject? And then I'll throw it out there. Obviously, Pope John basketball last year, boys basketball won the first ever Sussex County championship in boys basketball. But going out when they were playing the Vernons and the Morris Hills of the world, it didn't help either school because of such disparity in talent. Will the league possibly entertain the thought of allowing the non-publics to pick what sports they want to be in, or just you see what happens with football first?
Well, first of all, I think the non-publics just want to stay in the NJAC and leave it as it is.
Okay.
I believe that to be the case. Again, I don't want to speak for them,
Right.
but that would be my guess. Dan, the fear out there when the vote in December, if it does come to fruition, about separating the non-publics with the publics in football, is that it's going to go to other sports.
Right.
The situation in wrestling this past season, 10 of the 14 state champs were non-public, and so that's part of the problem. They believe it's going to go into other sports,
Right.
wrestling, basketball. And I don't know whether it should or shouldn't. I can't answer that question, but that's the fear. The other question that's been on the table is that some of the schools are they want to forfeit to the big schools,
Right.
the powerhouses. We don't have that situation in NJAC, although we had a little bit of a discussion about that with regard to Pope John and another school. But that's the issue. If schools are going to say, I'm going to just forfeit because I don't want my kids to get hurt, then something has to be done about it. Some decisions have to be made. Whether this is the answer in football or not, I don't know if you could really claim that in the other sports, that safety issue, as you could in football. But, it works in ice hockey.
Right.
It's working in ice hockey. You have the Gordon division, and actually, interesting enough, that was one of the discussions, was creating a Gordon division for football.
Right.
But again, I don't know how all that would be finalized. But right now, we're where we're at, waiting for a December vote. But this super conference in football may supersede that, and we'll see what happens.
And along the lines of sports like ice hockey, lacrosse, obviously the NJAC is one of the best, if not the best, lacrosse conference in the state. Currently, the boys play an NJAC schedule, and they play a schedule with the North Jersey Interscholastic League, the league they've been in for years. Is that something that's going to continue, or will it just become just an NJAC? Has that been discussed?
Well, it was discussed because when we first initiated it was a pilot, but we're now into regular. And it's strength of program scheduling is
Right.
what it is. And but lacrosse is a unique sport. Boys lacrosse, girls lacrosse, ice hockey. Maybe I'd put football in there. They're very unique because you, more than any other sport, you have the haves and have-nots. You have those schools that every year are a powerhouse every single year, and then the majority of the schools are cyclical. You have a good class and you do well. So right now it's continuing. They're going into the second year. One of the things that we are discussing in both conferences for boys and girls with regard to lacrosse is 2-year schedules versus 1-year schedule, because of the fluctuation in
Right.
in your the strength of your program. It every year you can go from, look at it. We won a division last year. This year we had 5 wins, and we didn't win any when we
Right.
moved up in the girls league. So we were 1-12 in the girls league, and that one that we won was a crossover. So and now we have to do that for another year, and we shouldn't be in that division, personally speaking.
Right.
But it is what it is. That's what I accepted, and that's what we are. And so as part of the league, you accept that result. But I think right now we'll stay the way it is, especially in lacrosse. I do agree with you. Our conference is really good in lacrosse.
Hey, it's a lot. That brings me to my next question. The success of the NJAC across the board. I mean, obviously lacrosse, softball. I mean, it's second to none in that. Last year proved that, and this year again, a lot of great success. Just talk about how much pride you take in that. That for years you heard about the Shore Conference, but the NJAC's right there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Our conference is really strong, top to bottom, and just about every sport. I mean, track. It's just amazing. Some of the athletes that we see on a day in and day out basis. And we're competitive on the state level. You look at some of the first round. I'll grab the Star Ledger and I'll look at the results, and I'll see, all right, first, second rounds of a state. Let's say it's basketball. How many of the NJAC schools won their games? You know, and you're right. It is a sense of pride. Your first pride is within your school, but then being a part of that conference, it makes you feel good. And we celebrate that when we go to our league. You know, when we have our league meetings. You know, we're always wishing each other luck in the states and congratulate those schools that are doing well in the states.
And speaking of the NJAC and how much success has gone across the board, will you guys think about ever, right now I believe cross country, track has the NJAC championships. And I know you guys are in the Morris County tournament and the Sussex teams are in Hunter Warren. Is there any thought of expanding an NJAC championship to other sports?
Probably not. We did that one year, one of the first years. We had some NJACs and NJAC championships, and we found that scheduling it all was just a nightmare. And right now it's working well with the sports that we're doing it in. I'm not a member of HWS. I don't want to speak for them.
Right.
I think it's great. I understand their issues, you know, when you got South Hunterdon and you've got Vernon or High Point, you know, if they can work out some of those geography issues and maybe have neutral sites in the middle somewhere, that would help them. But even the middle is a long travel for some of those schools. But I think it's good. But the Morris County contingent, if you will, in the NJAC is a very strong and loyal and traditional contingency, and they don't want to change. They want those Morris County championships. And I will venture to say right now, a Morris County championship is harder to win than a state sectional.
Oh, absolutely.
I believe so much so. So when I was coaching, I always put that, you know, to me, that was the top goal, was the Morris County championship. So I think it'll pretty much stay the way it is right now.
Now, after 6 years, and I always call you a hybrid because you're a Morris County school, but you dealt with the Sussex schools for so long, so you have a unique perspective on both. Do you see, I don't want to say there was a division to begin with, but there was a natural division. The schools didn't interact, but you interacted with both. After 6 years of the NJAC, have you seen that change at all? It's more of a conference thing instead of Morris Sussex? Because I know talking to other ADs at the very beginning, it was almost a Morris Sussex thing, like when a lot of the votes came down. Just your thoughts, has it melded more?
It's definitely melded more. There was a lot of tension back then because those Sussex County schools wanted to be a part, they wanted to make them NJAC championships.
Right.
And they wanted to do away with the Morris County championships, and the Morris County people were not going to do that. And that did create a wall, a divide. But that's settled. With the HWS, that's been settled. It's been several years now. That's working. I think if I could say there's a divide, it's more a small school, large school issue.
Right, it's not the counties anymore.
Yeah, and I think the 7 divisions, that's another advantage of the 7 divisions, I think. But that was an issue, that whole thing of who's going to go up and play, what big schools are going to have to play High Point, Vernon, you know, those schools up there. You know, it's funny, it's always about High Point, Vernon. You don't hear a lot of that conversation with the smaller schools, with the Kittitinnies, Newtons, Wallkills. But they're pretty much playing each other anyway. But I think it's worked out great, and I think we've become a lot stronger. And, you know, it's not to say in the future we won't take in more schools. You know, we've talked about that many times, and we'll see where that goes. But
you're right, because Newton plays Kinnelon in football, and that's not a short ride, and you hear neither team complain about it.
No.
Like, they look forward to playing each other because they're the same size.
Yep.
We'll wrap it up with something that you and Bill Edelman, the AD at Vernon, have been very passionate about. You put your money where your mouth is. You've gone to the state. You sent in proposals about the transfers, and you guys don't want to put words in your mouth, but hopefully address the issue of the rapid transfers with the publics and non-publics. Where do we stand with that right now?
Well, right now it's we wanted to, as part of the public non-public committee that Bill and I are on, we talked a great deal about transfers, and that committee, which is made up of 20 to 25 people from around the state, came up with a proposal, and we sent it to the executive committee, and they approved it. We wanted it put in place right away. We want it to be done in June so that starting on July 1, if you transferred, you were subjected to the rule. But the executive committee decided to put that to a vote to the general population as well, which will be in December. So it won't go into effect until probably the following year, school year. But basically, it deals with varsity players predominantly, and it has to do. We took away the public, non-public, and we called it closed and open. Closed was a public school that does not take tuition students or choice students. They have the students within their boundaries, and that's it. And open are all the others. And the bottom line is, if you go from public to public with a bona fide change of residence, it's the only time bona fide change of residence comes into play, then you can play right away. Other than that, it's a 45-day sit and no postseason play if you played varsity. If you were an underclass player, it doesn't apply.
And I think you and I have discussed this. Every school has a different policy of what's varsity and what's not.
Right.
How do you address that?
1 second of varsity competition.
So if you got
Means
into
you
a
played
game,
varsity.
you stepped on the field or the court or dove into the pool, you're a varsity athlete.
You're a varsity athlete.
And the vote will be December. Just what are your thoughts? I know in the past when things have gone to the general population for the vote, the general membership, people thought, well, this is a slam dunk, and it didn't pass or it got passed. You have a gut feeling? I mean, you've been on the forefront of this.
No, I don't. I think it has some of the qualities of what Bill and I had proposed way back when that was defeated with regard to the no state tournament play. I think it's the varsity status issue. Some of the staunch, I hate to say the word conservative, but the people who really want change and us to deal with transfers very hard, 1 year sits and those kind of things, they believe it should be all athletes, anybody that's in high school, freshmen and JV athletes. But that turned out not to be the case. We didn't want to punish kids. And I hate to use the word punish, but punish kids by making them sit when they're only freshmen, and
right.
They may decide to go to a non-public school or a choice school, and then that school wasn't for them, and they come back. Well, should that kid have to sit when he or she thought it might be for them, and it turns out not to be, or he or she were promised something and the promises weren't fulfilled, and then they come back? Well, we thought as non-varsity athletes, that wouldn't be so bad, because not too many people are recruiting non-varsity athletes, right. You know what I mean? And we also believe that, we talked about 7th and 8th graders at length. And I said, you know what, if a kid, even a Jefferson middle school kid, doesn't come here and goes to a non-public school or an open school, I've never had that kid. I haven't worked with that kid. My
right.
coaches haven't worked with that kid. It doesn't hurt as much. It's that kid we've been working with and dedicating and been loyal to, and then they all of a sudden get recruited away, or they
right.
decide they want to play for a powerhouse or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, if somebody's really that good, they can play for me or our school, and they're going to be recognized, and they're going to go. You don't have to play for those big schools to get recognized. Not in today's day. Not today. Maybe years ago, not
right.
today. Good athletes people know where they are.